If you were listening to the tail end of the Fox newscast just a couple of minutes ago, and there was a mention Danica Patrick has a new sponsor, does anybody even has she been on the track recently? You wouldn't know by the way she finishes. Here's a quick little, and this is part of racing mythology. When she was sponsored by GoDaddy, she was driving a green car, a very lime green automobile that was pretty easy to spot on the track. Among people who drive in NASCAR and I believe in many other circuits as well, there is a belief that green cars are bad luck. I have a friend who spent many, many years at the tracks around the country who shared that with me about 4 or 5 years ago. And when Danica came along and got into NASCAR and was driving this green, which it doesn't even look like it comes from the color spectrum, she was driving that car on the track. He said, this is not going to be good. And he said, because the suspicion is among NASCAR drivers that is going to be a car that is going to be trouble. And sure enough, it was. She spent more time in the garage getting repairs done than she actually did, it seemed, on the track. We have a lot to talk about today. Obviously, it's not a racing show. We could someday devolve into that, couldn't we now? In fact, I plan to go out to the Magic Valley Speedway this weekend and kill some time. A great place to do that, I should point out. I make that pitch really quick here, but I love to go out there on beautiful sunny night and sit there and just listen to the roar of those engines. And so I'll be going out again, I think, this Saturday night. I do this every couple of weeks, if not more often. A great way to spend a Saturday evening and very healthy way to spend it. You're not doing it you're not sitting at Mahogany Ridge. So there you go. I mean, you're breathing the clean air and you're watching some people have some great fun. One of the things we're going to be talking about a little later in the program, Rebecca Milsoika will join us from the Twin Falls City Council. Final budget hearing coming up with the city. And really, if you haven't had any input and you think you should, remember there are people out there who will come by and say, how did this happen? Or why is this happening? Or where did this come from? Well, that's why they have the budget hearings and they unveil it all and they seek your input. She'll talk about that a little later in the program. Dr. Jonathan Tripp will join us in about 20 minutes. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine today between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And I was just talking with one of my coworkers. She was saying that they did a practice run today with her children to get them ready for the notion they've got to go back to school tomorrow. So they did a organized practice run today, which I told her as I was coming into the studio. I said, yeah, my mother never had to do anything like that. She said, what'd your mother do? And my mother said, get your out of bed. And she didn't say bottom. But you know, when my mother said that, you'd hear feet clunk all over the house, and then racing downstairs for breakfast, and then you would get dressed, and then you would head off to school. And then my mother had a great method of doing it. She just she ruled by fear, and it seemed to work very, very well. And she got all three kids off to school every day on time, and we managed all to graduate by the time we were 17, 18 years old. So that's a topic we'll be talking about, back to school and what that means for your children, because as soon as they get back to school and in confined spaces, you're going to have a lot of people who have colds and other illnesses that get passed around among the children, and Dr. Tripp will talk about prevention today. So that's on the way in just a short while. But I wanted to spend a few minutes talking in this segment of the program. No, not about Gerald Fogel. No, not about Hillary Clinton. But I did want to talk to you about illegal immigration, because Donald Trump, who people had said had no ideas, he was just, talking a lot of bromides and telling everybody how rich he was while he was out campaigning for the Republican Party nomination for president, has really kicked over the apple cart when it comes to the illegal immigration issue. And I happened to come across something this morning before I came on the air, and it's been a big topic here on this program since I arrived 8 months ago. But listen to this. This comes from Paul Bedard, a pretty good writer, works for the Washington Examiner. Immigration protests go worldwide, many angrier than U.S. at job and culture losses. Now, you've got the American left always telling you, this is a great thing, and diversity will make us stronger. And again, they don't provide any evidence of that. They throw that out there, and you're supposed to accept that on belief. In Signs of a World Revolt, he writes, against immigration, a remarkable survey of some of the most populated nations finds that an average of half-polled believe there are too many immigrants in their countries, and nearly as many believe the newcomers are changing culture for the worse. 24 countries surveyed by the Canadian company Ipsos. The U.S. is in the middle of the average. For all of those people who scream xenophobes, that's a bad word, meaning that you fear anyone that's different or new coming into your country. For all the people who scream that, the United States is way down the list when it comes to people who are not happy about immigration. Turkey is first at 92%, followed by Italy, Russia, South Africa, Belgium, India, France, England, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Argentina, Hungary, and then the United States. You ever see that game show where that girl was asked about Hungary, and she thought they were asking her if she wanted something to eat? She probably votes, too, but that's a story for another day. 46% agree, now this is in these 24 countries, that immigration is causing their country to change in ways they don't like, so nearly half. 50% said immigration has placed too much pressure on public services in their country. Well, yeah. And then we're told, oh, we should be compassionate. Let me pull out my Bible and quote Matthew and tell you how we have to treat these people. Oh, and by the way, we're going to stop and perform a couple of abortions on the way over, too, because God would like that. That's the liberal argument you get on all of this. 45% of global respondents believe immigrants have made it more difficult for their own people to get jobs in their country. Only 1 in 5 say that immigration has had a positive impact. 20%, 1 in 5, that's what that means. 20% for you public school graduates who may be tuning in today. It's 8:13. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. You can reach the program today by dialing 736-0300, 736-0300. At least when you have immigrants coming from Guatemala and Belize and Mexico, El Salvador, Ecuador, and you've got people coming from that part of the world, they are nominally Christians. They are either generally of the Roman Catholic or Pentecostal churches, and they can mesh somewhat well into what you'd call a Judeo-Christian culture. But trying to bring people in from other parts of the world who have none of that background, that's often the most difficult effort. And as Bobby Jindal said a couple of weeks ago, immigration without assimilation is invasion. Something we've got to keep in mind when we talk about importing refugees here from, well, who come from a religious faith that is really more a law and an ideology that has been handed down to them. We have a caller with us on the air this morning, and you're up next. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and Top Story with Bill Colley. What's on your mind?
Boy, there's fat pedophiles and there's fat racists like you, huh?
Anything else? Hello? Hello? Man, that guy is... and he thinks he's clever. Andale, arriba. Donald Trump hits mark on immigration, quickly grasps complex problem. This from Charles Hurt at the Washington Times. Analysis Opinion, it's called. In his first real foray into policy specifics, Mr. Trump took on the single most insanely and absurdly broken part of the entire federal government, the refusal of politicians to recognize that America has borders. American politicians in both parties have conspired for years to ignore all of them. As a result, American workers and the poor have suffered the punishing full force of depressed wages and vanished jobs. The only winners are illegals from other countries. That means lawbreakers, we should point out. Big corporations and wealthy people who only like the illegals for the party wages or paltry wages, that is, that they require, and the Democratic Party that hopes to turn these poor servants into loyal welfare voters. He has the guts, according to this writer, speaking of Mr. Trump, and the vision and imagination and energy to actually force this platform back into the mainstream of politics where it belongs. Mr. Trump pledges to deport illegals who are here illegally. How do Democrats and even some Republican politicians find this to be in any way controversial? It's already the law. And despite, the writer says, what the lying bullies of the left say, having a border and enforcing its boundaries is not xenophobia. The writer says we could have built the Great Wall of China from the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico and back again just on what these clowns waste on junkets in Las Vegas for their bureaucrats. And then they insist it won't work. Well, funny, the writer says, the thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of concrete walls they build along freeways to keep noise out of neighborhoods seems to work just fine. Sure, somebody might tunnel underneath, but that's what Border Patrol is for. If walls don't work, the old line from Charles Krauthammer is, why is there one around the White House? Yeah, okay, that kind of makes logical sense. How about the Israelis who've thrown up walls pretty much along all of their borders as well? Now, you occasionally hear about some attacks, but they've really minimized those. You don't have angry Muslims jumping on buses anymore and blowing up 24 school children on a daily basis because their God commanded them to do that. Israel has pretty well cleaned up most of that from happening. So there you have it. We've got an issue here that has been ignored for so long, and you cannot, I went into the grocery store the other day. All I had to do was run in quickly and make a quick trip to the service counter. I'd been in there about 7:30 in the morning, and the people told me, they said, well, the service counter doesn't open until 9, so I'll come back. So I got out of church a little bit later that morning, and I decided to drop by the service counter again, and all of these people were lined up. All I could think of was MS-13 was sending the paychecks home, the drug proceeds. And literally, there were people who had to be there with translators and had to have all of the discussion with the woman behind the service counter translated, and the line ended up snaking all the way back to the front door and out into the parking lot as people waded through all of this. If you're going to come here, you're going to succeed if you learn how to speak English, number one. I know that when you go to Washington or even many state capitals and you say we need that as a national official language, which just about probably every other dang country in the world has, you get resistance. Oh, I don't know, the local newspaper might call me names. Look, the local newspaper is a dying institution. How many people actually sit down and say, I wonder what's on the editorial page today, and I wonder if any of our politicians are being xenophobes? Doesn't happen, okay? I would say, and I probably could make book on this, that your local newspaper here in the Magic Valley has a circulation that is now down to just a few thousand. Might have been as high, who knows, 25,000 at one point. And pretty soon it's not even going to have a print edition. It'll just vanish. It'll go away. That's the future. Advertisers will tell you around the community if a coupon is in the newspaper, the only people who come into the stores are people who are 70 and up who still get the newspaper out of habit because they always have. You don't see it anywhere else. So for all of you politicians who are wetting your knickers because you're worried that some 28-year-old newspaper editor might come down hard on you, give me a break. You're the only people who are actually reading those pages. Don't worry, your constituents don't bother. They have too many other things to worry about, such as somebody coming here illegally and taking their job, or somebody coming here illegally and then waging jihad. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story. We have a short break ahead. Save those telephone calls. It's 54. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's a wonderful day. 54, as I pointed out, but on the way, well, we'll be back into the 90s for a few days later this week and cool down on Saturday, but then again, the beginning of next week. Enjoy. Doesn't seem to be any rain in the forecast for at least a week. The temperatures, as I pointed out a little bit earlier, we're looking at some temperatures around 90 to 95 some days next week. One more reason that you really should be calling Tint Lady, because they put tints in your windows, at your office, your home, even your automobile. And that'll cut down on the heat that's coming through from the sun on a hot day up to 72%, which means you'll save on the cooling bill. It also means, of course, that you'll prevent the fading, serious fading from the bleaching of the sun on your furniture, carpets, curtains, and the like. So we recommend you give them a telephone call because they can come out and do a free estimate. And they also will remind you, you can look them up online at tintladyidaho.com. The telephone number happens to be 736-8469. Locally owned and operated, 20 years experience, 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. By appointment only on Saturday, closed Sunday. And remember, don't squint. Get tint. It's 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You can give us a telephone call if you like. The telephone number, 736-0300. 736-0300. You know that guy who calls and, screams and yells and just he's practically incoherent? Should we have a rule on this program that you actually have to be fluent in English in order to participate? Because the host is, and most of the people listening happen to be, and whether or not the United States has an official language, unofficially it's English. That's how you get business done. If you can't speak it, and you just, you talk when you're speaking, it's going to severely impact your effort to get ahead in this world. And so maybe we need to have a rule where when people call and they just shout and scream gibberish, they'll at least have to do it in plain English. I think that would be an excellent start on a program like this, because that way other people can understand you, even if, because if you can't do that, then they're all going to think you're a dope. Well, they may already think that. Come to mention, you're on the air with Bill Colley. It's 8:25. This is Top Story. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. I just wanted to share something with you that a attorney friend of mine in the western state, not going to name the state, has told me that he does public defender work. He said the Sinaloa cartel has been and is sending scouts to all the western states. If you go to all the dairies, most of them are illegal. This idea, everyone says, well, they're just here to make a wage. Indeed, most of them are. But Trump is right in that there are bad people coming up here. And they're not exactly collecting for the Red Cross.
Yeah, I think that we have to keep in mind that we've opened ourselves up to a great many dangers. It's not just the criminal element either. There was a cannery that opened up in Wichita, Kansas. A friend of mine sent me some facts and figures on this. Within a year of that cannery opening in Wichita, the number of drug-resistant tuberculosis cases jumped over 8,000% in the community. Now, somebody was coming from a part of the world where apparently they have a poor health system and deciding to introduce that, whether unintentionally or not, intentionally or not, it's unintentional, obviously, introduced that in that community. And it was rampant for a time. When they say drug-resistant, that means there's nothing you can do about it. It's pretty much a death sentence. But on the other hand, the cannery got some really cheap labor. So greed trumped national security or local security or people's good health. You're up next. You're on the air. You're on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Or not. 736-0300. 736-0300. But you understand, from an Alinskyite perspective, this is all about destroying the United States. From a United Nations perspective, this is all about breaking down borders so that we can eventually have some sort of global governance. And sit here and keep telling us, no, we can't do anything about this. It's baloney. And we know you're bald-faced liars. Why do you think people like Trump are resonating with so many voters? And we still at least are allowed to vote, so perhaps this is the guy who could actually finally kick all of the legs out from under the stool. You're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, we can do something about it, but no one's ever going to do it because it's the good old boy system everywhere you turn, is to find the employers that are hiring the illegals. Find them big time. If you keep doing that, they won't hire the illegals. But they're going to make a lot more money hiring illegals by no benefits, lower pay, all the above and beyond. So, there's just a bunch of whiners. Why don't you get after the people who are hiring them?
Well, we should also, because so many of these people are coming here to deal dope, we should also get after the dope fiends, because everybody out there who's puffing away on some weed or snorting some cocaine or shooting up some heroin or in this day and age using methamphetamine, that's controlled, by the way, by the cartels now as well. Maybe we should do something about that, because how do you eliminate the supply? Can I mention something quickly? Most of your dope users happen to be liberals. Let's be honest about that. So if the liberals who talk about nullifying all sorts of other laws, if they would actually stop using dope, we'd end the market, and we'd end a great deal of crime, and we'd end a lot of that trafficking coming back and forth across the border. Thank you much for the telephone call. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Coming up next, Dr. Jonathan Tripp will be joining us, Tripp Family Medicine. The show is called Better Health. He'll be here between 8:30 and 9 o'clock this morning. We also welcome your telephone calls while the doctor is in studio.